Hey, this is week 4 SQL class. So this week we're going to start really looking into the select statement a bit more in terms of building reports. So I pulled up here documentation. I'll include it in the links to the select. Kind of, here's everything that can be done with it. So this is, really the main thing that's used within SQL after you've designed your database and after you've worked on how the data is going to be put into it and how all that's going to be handled. This becomes the next big thing in terms of how do we search it, how do we get the data out of it that we want to get out. One really good example of this would be searching on Facebook. They added their new graph search publicly sometime last year that allows you to say, like, hey, I'm looking for people who work at LCSC or something like that. That goes to the back end and becomes a query, a select statement, essentially, on some set of data, some type of database. They use a highly modified version of MySQL, but it's really not that different from even the basics of what we're going to be looking at. There's just have a few more wildcards involved and distribution, but at the end of the day, it's all still select statements on a database. So we're going to look at today some built-in functions, the order by clause, some column-based switch statements, and then the basics of the where clause. So to start here, you can see, within this, okay, it tells you select, table with blah, blah, blah. And it tells you, this thing starts with select, and then you can give some modifiers on an expression. And then it gives you this asterisk, which, we've been using. We say something like select star from users, right? So that asterisk is what's showing up here, or you can, put other things in there. The from, we've already kind of talked about the from being, hey, here's the table that we're selecting the data out of. So there's some other things that come on here. Other clauses, there's a where clause, a group by clause, a having clause, a window clause, order by, limit, offset, fetch, for, and then it says, where from item can be one of, any of these things. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today, along with some functionality in terms of some built-in functions. So the first thing we're going to see are these built-in functions, and there's a lot of stuff in here. We're not going to look at all of them in this course even. A lot of them have really specific purposes. We're just going to take a look at one really simple one that gets used quite often, and then I'll show you where to find some other information if you wanted to use it. So one of the functions that gets used quite often is called the count function, and it returns a count of how many rows are in the set of data that would otherwise be coming back, or if it is coming back. So when I run this same statement, this select from users, we can see, okay, 23, there's a row, 46, here's a row, 26, here's a row, 32, here's a row. So right, so that's 4 rows that we've seen. I can hold enter here, and it'll give me a bunch more rows, but I don't necessarily always need to want to go on there and look at that. So one thing that I can do is I can say, give me a count. From users, and instead of returning the data, it returns a count of how many rows of data would be coming back if I also asked for data. So I can at the same time, right, because this is just a column, I could, if I knew the name of the thing, alias. Oh, I'm terrible at this. All right, I'll just go with a star. Oh, it's giving me a different error. All right. So for the moment, never mind that. It wants to do something different here. So when I say select and just give me all the data, it's going to give me these columns: ID, alias, email, password, blah, 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 blah. There's a bunch of them in there. If we were to describe the table, we could see that, there's a bunch of things going on in here. So when I run this count statement, I could pass in one of those values. So we know that there's an ID column. It doesn't really matter what you're counting on in this case, because we're only talking about one table. All of them, even if they don't have data in it, the row will include that column. So it doesn't really matter how you count it. So, the simple way here is just to use an asterisk. So let me get this back to the top of the screen here so you guys can see. All right. So that's the count function. I've included in the notes. There's some other functions. There's some string-based functions. So on the strings, if you're dealing with strings, right? We've already seen concatenation. Convert to lowercase, character length, positions, substrings. There's a lot more functionality there. And then in dealing with dates are a lot of times people really like functions on dates. For example, let's see. Age. So you can subtract dates, one date from one another, and it'll give you something like this. It can be really useful. You'll probably see something like that in the assignment. And you just literally, pass it 2 timestamps, and it gives you the value back. So that's pretty cool. There's also some mathematical functions. You can do all of these things. On top of that, you can get, absolute value, roots, ceilings, convert radians to degrees. If you need pi for whatever, if you're doing math in your select statements, you can round stuff, you can get random numbers. There's a lot of stuff you can do that are built in. Some of the stuff is better left to, whatever the front end of your system needs, and then you get the full data out of the database. But because these databases are written in a low level, in C, they're going to run quicker than perhaps your front end. So if you wanted to tax somewhere on your system, or if you needed, to pick up some speed, then you can always do it on the back end. So that's it's a little bit about functions. So the next thing here is this order by, and order by, as you saw kind of at the beginning there, is part of the select statement. So if I can copy properly. So when you look at it here, you're actually on the select statement page, and it's just an anchor tag for order by. So the way that order by works is you pass it a column name that you want to have the order on. So if I go in here real quick and I say users, right? So we've been getting users, and they're not really in any order. If you notice, even if I do this, if I just want the ID column in users, it's not in any order: 23, 46, 26, so on and so forth. If I wanted to order it up, and I just do this by default, it's going to order ascendingly. So from smallest to biggest. So 1 to I don't know what the biggest number in this thing is. 69, and then it tells me if there's 54 rows. So again, that's a simple select. We tell it the column that we want back. We tell it where to go get that data from users, and then we say tack on the end here. Okay, order by the ID. So this ordering kind of okay, we've got a couple things going on here now. We've got this select. We're telling it where to select from, then we're telling it what to do. As we add where clauses and add some more things in there, they need to actually be done in the order that they're listed here. So you'll see that order by comes after a where. In terms of how this is written out, it says you tell it select, then you tell it the columns, then you tell it from where, and then the next thing that you would have is the where clause. The next order of kind of operations here would be a group by, then a having, then a window, then an order by, then a limit, then an offset, then a fetch, then a for. So if you have some statement, select something from somewhere where something is happening, order it by this. It has to be done in that way. You can't, for example, once we see this, that doesn't make any sense. It'll give you an error. It says, hey, that order, I don't get it, right? The order that this has been written in is incorrect. This order by needs to come after this from. So again, if we wanted to kind of switch this and order it descendingly, from biggest to smallest, we could do that. Let me see here. We've got this alias column. So if we order it by that, it does it on alphabetical. So the numbers obviously come before letters, and then the letters all come in. We could just as easily change the order on that to descending, and then it'll obviously reverse the alphabetical order. So order by, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. As you'll see, there are some things that can be done with it a little more, but for our purposes, really, we care about ascending and descending on a certain column name. We can actually do it on more than one column. You can run multiple order bys. So again, you just separate things with a comma. So I don't know that this will really matter, because it's doing ID first. None of them are going to be the same. But let's see if we can do the other way. See if we get anything. If there's any duplicates, obviously then it hits over to the second one. So right now, again, it's alphabetical on alias. Just trying to see if there were any duplicate values in there, but I don't think there can be. Let's see if there's anything in here. Okay, so let me get that real quick. Okay, so that's not one. No, I don't think I'm going to be able to get that. So I said user. If you saw what popped up there, it says the current user. That's me. I'm logged in. So user is a keyword, whereas I want the column named user. It's just named user here. And I can't get it unless I use backticks. So I can't even type backticks. But a backtick is this. So my statement would have to be unfortunately, the way I have my terminal set up, my backtick is an actual command. That's why it switched windows down here. If I go to 1 to 2 to 3 to back to 2, I hit my backtick and then click a number. So I can't actually type that one in here. I would have to use pgadmin in order to get that in because my terminal's not set up well. But I was going to show you just a double order by because there were some duplicate values under the school. You can see, there's 5 5 4 4 4 5 4 4 4 4 4. So if we were to order on that, you'd notice, okay, you get 2, then you get a bunch of 4s and a bunch of 5s. So if we wanted to then order, the user as the second thing in the order there, we would throw that in. If we had this statement and say it worked, we would do something like that, where you select the school and the user from user schools, and then we order by school and user. Fortunately here, it's just going to give me the current user, so it doesn't really make any sense. But if I could use backticks, I could better explain that. Alright, so let's keep moving here. So next thing here are these column conditionals, switch statements. And I think there's a really good example on the page, so I'm just going to look at that real quick. So it tells you how it works. Okay, and then here's a good example. It says if you select everything from their test, there's one column in test. It's A. It has 3 values, 1, 2, and 3. Well, you can run then a switch statement on it. Select A. Here's the switch statement from this case to the end. For a case when A is equal to 1, then rather than putting in 1, return 1, the word. If it's 2, then return 2. If it's anything other than 1 or 2, then return other. Then we end that switch statement, and then we just add this from test. And so what it did is it said, okay, here's A, all the columns. Here's the case that we're getting back. So we don't actually have to have this A in here. We could just say case, and it would just give us 1 to other. So that's kind of how that one works. Again, same thing going on here. And that's just a conditional based thing if you wanted to have some different values come back, or if there were certain cases where one thing needed to happen over another thing. So that's how that one works. No reason to really copy paste that in. So then the last thing that we've got going on, we're just going to look at really simple some where statements, some where clauses. So that again is on the select statement, and there's this very little thing here. It says, okay, there's a where clause that you could throw on. So the way that the where works is, if you've ever used a conditional in any other language, you've got greater than, less than, greater than equals to, less than equals to. Normally you do equals with 2 equals. In SQL, to do equals, you just have 1 equal. So those are kind of the conditions that can happen, to check whether something is true or not. You can also have not equal to. So let's give that a quick run through here. So if I say, give me the ID from users. Okay, so it gives us a bunch of IDs. If I then say the same thing where the ID is less than 10. Okay, well, there's only one thing there. What if I say less than 30? Okay, now there's 14 things that came back. What if what if I'm logging a user into the system and I just want to get their user ID? Well, we could do something like my ID is 1 for username Lakesta. So we could also do something like give me a count as to how many let me see. I think there's some dates in this thing. Created. Never mind. Let's see if there are any. So the statement I just ran there, give me the users where active is not equal to true. So if there's any users in the database that aren't currently active, and it said there's 2 Vmail and Ginger Marie. They're signed up, but they're inactive. So they're not currently able to use this site, whatever the site is for. So that's, quite simply, oops. Just some simple where clauses. It comes after this. If I wanted to say ID is less than 30, order by ID. Okay. So it gives me, they're ordered by the ID, and it only is going to give me the rows where this ID is less than 30. So once we get to 29, that's the last one. So there's some more stuff that you can do with where clauses, which we will see next week, beyond just the equals, not equals, less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. We can do some other stuff, but we're not going to see that this week. So that's kind of it for this week. So we've covered some functions, the count. We've seen that there's stuff available to work with strings, with math, with dates. We looked at the case statement, the switch statement on column to check, if a value is something, do something with it that's special. We saw the order by. You pick a column name and tell it whether to order ascendingly or descendingly. Then we briefly here saw the where clause, which allows us to filter a bit more, to have some more specific results. And with those, they can be done mathematically, which we've seen, where the ID is less than some number. They can also be done with words, where you saw, hey, give me where this alias is equal to some alphabetical thing. So we'll see that there's a lot more that can be done with that next week. That is all for this week. So, thanks.